The studio was alive long before the cameras officially rolled. From the outside, it felt like any other high-profile TV debate night. But everyone in that room knew today was different. Tonight wasn't just another conversation about leadership, it was a test, and sooner or later someone on that stage was going to crack. The host started. His voice tried to sound light, but the words came out heavier than he intended. "Tonight is about leadership," he said, pausing just a fraction too long, "and what it costs." The pause landed harder than the sentence itself. Ivanka didn't wait. She leaned forward slightly, claiming the moment as if it belonged to her, and smiled in that controlled, confident way that looks friendly until you listen closely. "Some leaders talk about character," she said, nodding as if she were being generous. Then she tilted her head and sharpened her tone just enough for the audience to feel it. "Some leaders actually build a country." A few people in the crowd reacted instantly. Some clapped, some sucked in a breath, because everyone understood the line wasn't abstract. It was aimed straight across the table. "That's Obama." The moderator shifted in his chair, opening his mouth like he might step in, but she kept going, riding the moment before anyone could take it from her. She framed her attack like it was common sense, like anyone who disagreed was out of touch with real life. "Americans don't pay rent with speeches," she said, letting out a soft laugh that sounded harmless, but wasn't. The laugh did the work for her, painting him as elegant, distant, theoretical. "They don't eat memoirs," she added, this time without the laugh, letting the words sit. The audience reacted louder now because that line cut deeper. It wasn't just about policy. It was about worth, about whether his calm, thoughtful style had ever meant anything to people who felt left behind. Ivanka glanced at him briefly, a quick look that said, "Are you going to answer that? Or are you going to keep hiding behind that smile?" Obama didn't interrupt. He didn't shift in his seat or raise his eyebrows or signal annoyance. He just watched her, steady and unreadable, letting her finish every sentence. The silence between her lines started to stretch, and the crowd began reacting to that silence more than to her words. It felt deliberate, like he was giving her all the rope she wanted and letting the cameras capture exactly how far she was willing to go. Ivanka mistook that calm for hesitation and pushed harder, her tone still smooth but edged now with something sharper. "People are tired of being inspired," she said. "They want results, real ones, not lectures about unity from people who don't have to make the hard calls anymore." A murmur rolled through the room. This wasn't subtle anymore. This was a direct challenge to his legacy, wrapped in polite language, but loaded with accusation. The moderator glanced at Obama, then back at Ivanka, visibly unsure whether to step in or let it burn. Obama stayed still. The longer he waited, the heavier the room felt, like everyone realized this wasn't a normal back and forth. This was pressure building. Ivanka crossed her arms lightly, confidence still on her face. But there was a hint of impatience now. She expected resistance. She expected a rebuttal. What she didn't expect was to be left alone with her own words. When Obama finally spoke, it wasn't loud or sharp. It was quiet enough that people leaned forward without realizing it. He looked at her directly, not offended, not defensive, just focused. "Go ahead," he said evenly, his voice calm, almost inviting. "I want people to hear you clearly." The line landed harder than any comeback could have. It wasn't a retreat, it was a challenge. Ivanka didn't slow down. She shifted in her chair and angled her body toward the audience, almost turning her back on Obama without fully doing it, a visual move that said he was no longer the conversation, but the example. "Unity is a beautiful word," she said, smiling like she was offering a compliment. "It sounds great on a poster. It sounds even better in a speech." Her smile tightened. "But unity doesn't mean much when people are still broke, still angry, still waiting." She let the pause stretch just long enough to sting. "My father made hard calls. Some people made beautiful sentences and left everyone else to deal with the mess." A sharp reaction rippled through the crowd, louder than before, because this wasn't theory anymore. It was a personal indictment, delivered calmly and meant to humiliate. She pressed harder, sensing blood. "You can talk about hope all day. she said, her voice smooth but cutting. Hope doesn't reopen factories. Hope doesn't sign paychecks. Hope doesn't stop the clock when families are drowning. She gestured lightly with one hand as if dismissing something fragile. Some leaders act. Others explain why acting was complicated. A few people clapped. Others shifted uncomfortably. The moderator leaned forward, ready to step in. But Ivanka kept control of the rhythm, stacking sentence on sentence so there was no opening. She had turned Obama into a symbol of elegance without consequence, and she wanted the audience to sit with that picture. Obama waited until the room settled again. When he spoke, he didn't raise his voice or change his posture, and that contrast made the moment sharper. "When you say results," he said evenly, "I just want to be clear what you mean." He looked at her directly now, not the audience. Results for who? The question cut through the noise like a blade. Who wins? Who loses? And who never even gets invited into the room when those hard calls are made? He let that hang, then continued without urgency. Because numbers can go up while lives fall apart, and someone still gets to call that a success. He leaned back slightly, hands still relaxed, and spoke as if he were explaining something obvious that had been ignored on purpose. "A tower is measurable," he said. "You can count floors. You can put your name on it. You can point to it and say, 'Look what I built.'" He paused, eyes never leaving her. Trust is measurable too. Just not in dollars, not in headlines, and not in applause. A low murmur moved through the audience, the kind that comes when people feel a point land before they fully process it. Ivanka's smile froze for a split second, then reset, sharper than before. She tried to laugh it off, but the laugh came out thin. "There it is," she said, shaking her head slightly. "The moral lecture." She leaned back, arms crossing loosely, signaling dismissal. People are tired of being talked down to by elites who think speeches are leadership. The word elite was deliberate, thrown like a label meant to shrink him. They don't want sermons. They want action. She nodded to herself, as if the case were closed, but the room didn't fully follow her this time. The energy had shifted just enough to make her sound defensive instead of confident. Obama didn't correct her or argue the label. He didn't even react to the word elite. He just answered calmly, almost gently. "Sometimes truth feels like scolding," he said, "especially when it's aimed at you." The line landed hard, and this time the reaction was immediate and uneasy. A few people laughed, but it wasn't supportive laughter. It was nervous. Ivanka opened her mouth to respond, then closed it, her smile tightening again as her eyes flicked briefly toward the moderator. Ivanka leaned back like someone who believed the verdict had already been reached. She crossed one leg over the other, relaxed on the surface, confident underneath, and let her voice drop into something colder and more deliberate. "It's easy to be graceful when you're not responsible anymore," she said, eyes forward, not even bothering to look at him. The sentence hit, and the room went still. She felt it and pushed further. "It's easy to sound wise when the hard decisions aren't on your desk." Then she finally glanced at Obama. Just long enough to make it sting. "He can afford to be poetic. My father can't. He has to decide, every single day, with consequences." The silence that followed felt like agreement, and Ivanka wore it like proof she had won. She didn't stop there. She let the quiet work for her, then added one more cut. "There's a big difference between talking about leadership and actually carrying it," she said. "One looks good on television. The other keeps the lights on." A few people in the audience shifted. Some nodded, some froze, unsure whether they were witnessing confidence or cruelty. The moderator's hands tightened on his notes, but he didn't interrupt. Ivanka's posture said everything. This wasn't debate anymore. This was a verdict. And for a brief moment, it felt like the room had decided she was right. Obama didn't react right away. He stayed still, eyes steady, letting the weight of her words sit exactly where she wanted them to. Then he spoke quietly, almost conversational. "That's true," he said. "People love him because he acts." A few heads nodded again, instinctively, and Ivanka's smile widened just a touch, like she had pulled him into agreeing with her. Then Obama paused, just long enough to pull the floor out from under that agreement. and that's why they fear him too. The shift was immediate. The room didn't erupt. It tightened. The difference between love and fear suddenly mattered, and everyone could feel it. Ivanka's expression flickered, irritation flashing through the polish before she masked it. She opened her mouth to push back, but Obama kept his tone calm and steady, which somehow made the words hit harder. "I respect family loyalty," he said, nodding slightly toward her. "Standing up for the people you love is human." The line softened the room for half a second, and Ivanka almost relaxed. Then he finished it. "But when loyalty replaces truth, when defending a name becomes more important than defending reality, that isn't strength." He looked directly at her now. "That's surrender." The reaction rolled through the studio unevenly. Murmurs, a few sharp inhales, the sound of people realizing something uncomfortable had just been said out loud. Ivanka's smile didn't vanish, but it tightened so hard it looked painful, her jaw setting as if she were holding something back. Obama hadn't attacked her father directly. He hadn't insulted anyone. He had done something worse. He had reframed her confidence as denial, and her loyalty as weakness. And by staying calm, he made her earlier certainty feel aggressive by comparison. The moderator jumped in quickly, almost too quickly, his voice pitching slightly higher as if he were trying to pull the room back from a ledge. He smiled, hands raised in a calming gesture, and steered the conversation toward safer ground. "Let's take a step back," he said, glancing between them. "We've talked a lot about action and results. I want to talk about values, about how personal values, especially family, shape leadership." The audience exhaled collectively, grateful for the pause, but the tension didn't disappear. It just settled lower, like heat trapped under the surface. Everyone could tell this reset wasn't about curiosity. It was damage control. Ivanka took the opening immediately, slipping back into a tone that sounded rehearsed, confident, and controlled. She straightened in her chair, her smile returning to something smoother, safer. "Family is the foundation of everything," she said firmly. "It's what gives leadership purpose." She spoke now like someone delivering a message she trusted, one she had practiced until it felt bulletproof. "My father leads for his family and for the country he loves. Those two things aren't separate to him." She let that sit, then leaned forward slightly. "We don't separate the personal from the political. That's authenticity." Her eyes flicked to Obama, daring him to challenge the one thing most people are afraid to touch. She continued, layering the argument carefully. "Loyalty isn't weakness," she said. "It's strength. It's knowing who you are and where you come from." Her voice warmed as she spoke, wrapping patriotism and family pride into one package. "When leaders forget their families, they forget the people they're supposed to serve." A few audience members nodded, relieved to hear something familiar, something clean. For a moment, it felt like she had rebuilt her footing. She sat back, confident again, waiting to see if he would cross the line and attack family on live television. Obama didn't rush. He nodded slowly, almost thoughtfully, as if he were agreeing with her more than she expected. "Family matters," he said simply. "I won't argue that." The words landed gently, and Ivanka's shoulders eased just a bit. He wasn't fighting her here. He wasn't dismissing the point. That alone felt like a small win. Then he added softly, almost conversational, "I just want to understand where the boundary is." His tone stayed calm, respectful, but the question hung in the air longer than it should have. Ivanka's smile stayed in place, but something behind her eyes tightened, like she suddenly realized the ground she was standing on wasn't as solid as it looked. The moderator glanced down at his notes, then back up, sensing the tension creeping back in despite his effort to cool things down. Obama didn't raise his voice or change his posture. He leaned in just slightly, the way someone does when they want to be precise, not confrontational. "Sometimes public life blurs lines people shouldn't blur," he said calmly, as if he were making an observation instead of opening a door. He spoke slowly, choosing each word with care. "Things get said in interviews, jokes, comments, offhand remarks." He shrugged almost imperceptibly. "I'm not accusing anyone of anything. I'm just asking what you're defending when those lines get crossed." The room stayed quiet, the kind of quiet that comes when people realize a conversation is narrowing. Ivanka smiled, but it was different now. Tighter, practiced, edged with irritation. "I'm not sure what you're referring to," she said lightly, even though her tone had sharpened. "We're here to talk leadership, not internet nonsense or recycled sound bites." A few people in the audience shifted in their seats. The word nonsense felt dismissive, and it didn't quite land the way she wanted it to. She leaned back, trying to reassert control through distance. "I think it's important we stay focused on serious issues," she added, as if drawing a line he wasn't allowed to cross. Obama didn't flinch. He nodded once, slowly, and answered without heat. "Interesting," he said, "because you brought family into leadership. Not the internet." The sentence landed flat and clean, with no room to spin it. He kept his eyes on her, steady, unblinking. When family becomes the proof of character, it's fair to ask where the boundaries are. The audience reacted with a low murmur, not loud enough to interrupt, but loud enough to signal something had shifted. Ivanka opened her mouth, then closed it again, the smile on her face starting to look more like effort than confidence. Obama didn't rush the moment. He waited until the studio fell into a full, unnatural quiet, the kind where even breathing feels loud. Then he leaned forward just enough to signal intention, not aggression, and spoke in a voice so gentle it forced everyone to listen. "Barron is your son?" The words didn't come with heat or emphasis. They dropped flat, heavy, like a paperweight hitting glass. The moderator froze, eyes locked, hands motionless. A few people in the front row leaned forward instinctively, as if they hadn't heard correctly, but were afraid to miss the repetition that never came. Ivanka blinked hard and let out a short laugh that sounded automatic, almost panicked. "Excuse me?" she said, her pitch rising just enough to give her away. She shook her head, smiling too quickly, too tightly. "That's ridiculous." Another laugh followed, thinner than the first. "Everyone knows that's not true." The words came out fast, stacked on top of each other, like she was trying to outrun the moment instead of answer it. Obama didn't respond. He didn't repeat the question. He just watched her, eyes steady, letting the room hear the strain creeping into her voice. The silence stretched again, longer this time, and the meaning of the question began to mutate in the air. It wasn't about biology, and everyone understood that. It was about boundaries that had never been clearly drawn, about things said too casually in public and dismissed too quickly afterward. Ivanka shifted in her seat, fingers curling against the table as her grip tightened. "I don't see how this is relevant," she said sharply now, irritation breaking through the polish. "This is inappropriate." She emphasized the word as if saying it firmly enough might shut the moment down. But it didn't. It only made her sound defensive. Obama finally spoke again, still calm, still controlled, and somehow colder because of it. "Then it should be easy to answer without trembling," he said quietly. The line sliced through the room. A few audience members clapped on instinct, like they would after a sharp comeback, then stopped mid-motion when they realized how wrong it sounded. The aborted applause echoed awkwardly, making the silence afterward feel even heavier. Ivanka opened her mouth to respond, closed it, swallowed hard, then tried to reset her posture, sitting up straighter, as if physical control might bring the moment back. Seconds dragged by. 10, 15, 20, no moderator rescue, no music cue, no camera cut wide enough to soften the focus. The camera stayed tight, unforgiving, capturing every flicker of uncertainty on her face. Ivanka glanced down at the table, then back up, her eyes darting briefly as if searching for an exit or a lifeline. Her earlier confidence was gone now, replaced by something brittle and exposed. Each second of silence felt like a judgment being written in real time, not by Obama, but by the room itself. The 31 seconds became unbearable. People shifted in their seats, not out of boredom, but discomfort. Ivanka tried once more, her voice quieter now, less certain. "This is a cheap shot," she said, though it sounded more like a plea than an accusation. Obama didn't react. He didn't need to. He sat still, letting her words fall flat, letting the silence swallow them. Obama didn't rush to finish her. He let the silence settle, thick and uncomfortable, then spoke with the kind of calm that made every word feel heavier than a shout. Purpose is good, he said evenly, as if reminding the room of something obvious. Purpose gives people meaning. He paused, eyes steady, voice still low. But purpose without responsibility is dangerous. The sentence landed like a verdict, not because it was harsh, but because it felt undeniable. And when power is treated like a family heirloom, he continued, passed down, protected, defended at all costs, the nation becomes collateral. A murmur rippled through the audience, not loud enough to interrupt, but loud enough to confirm the shift. Ivanka stiffened and reached for the last line she knew by heart, the one that usually ended arguments instead of starting them. "My father's record speaks for itself," she said, the words coming out fast, clipped, defensive. It sounded less like confidence now and more like reflex. She nodded once, as if repetition might turn the phrase into armor. "People can see what he's done." The room didn't move. No applause followed, no approving sounds. The silence made her line feel smaller than she intended. Obama nodded slowly, acknowledging her without conceding anything. "It does," he said calmly. "That's why we're still cleaning up the echoes." The sentence landed clean and sharp, turning her slogan into aftermath instead of proof. Ivanka opened her mouth to respond, then hesitated. You could see her searching for another angle, another phrase that might reset the moment. But everything sounded rehearsed even before she said it. "You're twisting things," she said finally, irritation breaking through. "This is exactly what people are tired of. Judgment from people who don't live with the consequences." Her voice rose slightly, the control slipping just enough for the audience to feel it. Obama didn't interrupt. He didn't argue the point. He simply waited until her words fell into the quiet and stayed there, unsupported. When he spoke again, his tone softened, and that softness cut deeper than anything sharp. "I understand defending the people you love," he said, and for the first time his voice carried unmistakable empathy. "That instinct is human. It's powerful." Ivanka's shoulders loosened just a fraction, like she thought she'd been offered common ground. Then he finished the thought, eyes still on her. "But loving someone should never cost you your honesty." The line didn't accuse her of lying. It implied something worse, that she couldn't afford to tell the truth even if she wanted to. Ivanka looked down briefly, then back up, her expression composed but hollow, like someone holding themselves together out of habit rather than conviction. The fight drained out of her posture, leaving behind something quieter and more exposed. Obama hadn't humiliated her with insults or volume. He had placed a mirror in front of her and stepped back. The audience understood what they were witnessing. This wasn't a takedown by force. It was a collapse by clarity, and there was no rebuttal left that wouldn't sound like an excuse. Ivanka stood up before anyone could stop her. She gathered her papers with movements that looked practiced but rushed, her smile returning in a brittle, professional shape that didn't reach her eyes. "I have another engagement," she said lightly, as if this were always the plan, as if she hadn't just spent the last half hour fighting to keep control of the room. No one challenged it. No one believed it either. The moderator blinked, half rising from his chair, unsure whether to protest or thank her. The only sound that cut through the silence was the sharp click of her heels against the studio floor, each step echoing louder than any argument that had come before it. That sound followed her all the way to the curtain, and when she disappeared behind it, the absence she left behind felt heavier than her presence ever had. For a moment, no one spoke. The audience didn't clap. They didn't whisper. They just watched Obama, still seated, still calm, as if the storm had passed around him without ever touching him. He didn't look victorious. He didn't look satisfied. He looked composed, in control, like a man who understood that the end of a confrontation doesn't need fireworks to be final. The moderator cleared his throat awkwardly and tried to reset the tone, but the room had already decided who held it now. Obama leaned back slightly, then forward again, signaling that he wasn't finished. Not with her, but with the idea she had been defending. "Leadership isn't about having the loudest voice in the room," he said evenly, his words cutting through the leftover tension. "It's about asking the right questions, even when those questions make people uncomfortable." The audience leaned in, not because he raised his voice, but because he didn't. "Especially," he added, "when the truth is close to home." A few heads nodded slowly, the kind of nod that comes when something lands deeper than applause. He didn't name her. He didn't need to. Everyone knew exactly what he was talking about. He paused, letting the quiet work one last time, then delivered the line that would be replayed long after the cameras stopped rolling. "If you have to raise your voice to be believed," he said calmly, "maybe the truth isn't on your side." The sentence didn't sound triumphant. It sounded settled. He followed it with one final thought, his tone steady, almost reflective. Clarity doesn't shout, it stands there. The audience finally reacted, not with an explosion, but with a slow, building applause that felt earned rather than automatic. As the clapping filled the studio, the contrast was impossible to miss. Ivanka had left in a hurry, guarded by excuses and silence. Obama remained, unshaken, answering questions no one had dared to ask out loud until that night. He hadn't chased her off stage. He hadn't demanded the last word. He had simply held the room until it chose him. When the lights dimmed and the cameras cut away, the outcome was already clear. She had exited to escape the moment. He stayed to define it. If you watched this moment all the way through, you already know this wasn't just a debate. It was a turning point. Conversations like this don't end when the cameras stop rolling. They linger, they echo, and they force people to rethink what real leadership actually looks like. If you want more stories where calm beats chaos, where questions hit harder than shouting, and where power is tested under pressure, stay with us. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts below. Because sometimes, the most important battles aren't won by volume, but by clarity.